In this video, we're going to talk about surveys for residential property investing. So what survey do you need? Do you want one at all? Are they necessary? Are they a waste of money? Are they a good idea? Welcome to Property Insight. I'm Neil Harding.
And I'm Mike Ashworth. Building surveys, valuation survey, property survey, they come with at different levels. Typically, if you're going to get a mortgage on a property, then the mortgage lender will insist on having what they call a valuation survey, which is essentially to come along and inspect the property, make sure it exists, and make sure that it's safe and it ticks all the boxes as far as the lending criteria is concerned. They can then report back on whether there are any issues. Some mortgage valuation reports will actually detail perhaps some works that they might require you to carry out, and they might even hold what's called a retention on the mortgage, which is basically where they'll say, we're happy to lend on the property, but we're going to pull back on some of the lending because this work needs doing, and once that work's done, they'll then lend you the money on it. That typically happens more with buy-to-let properties than residential ones. Residential mortgages tend to carry little sort of different criteria. And I suppose we're really here to talk about whether it's actually worth getting mortgage, or let's say building surveys, out of the mortgage sphere, because mortgages will insist on you having a valuation. The only time when they don't really value is if you're perhaps remortgaging with the same lender. They tend to, indexed linked valuation, and if you disagree with that index linked valuation, they are prepared to send out a valuer to re-evaluate the value of the property, but typically they might charge you for that.
There are a few main scenarios here that spring to mind. You might be buying with a mortgage through an estate agent. You might be doing that but with cash. You might be buying at an auction, cash, and there's not an awful lot of time to complete. You might be buying at an auction with bridging. There's some scenarios where you might end up thinking, shall I go for a valuation here, a survey here? Do I need one? Not sure. One good thing about getting a survey is that if, as you're just describing there, Mark, if the survey comes back and says, actually, this property's got a problem with it, then for one thing, you might have just saved yourself a heap of money. But for another thing, you might actually be able to use that as leverage to renegotiate the sales price. Obviously, that doesn't really work on an auction because it goes for what it goes for. But if it's through an estate agent, you can go back to the vendor and say, do you know what? This house has got £10,000 worth of costs that the survey's just revealed. I need 10k off the asking price.
I've had a couple of scenarios where I've had external surveys done on, I say external, I don't mean external as in external to the property, but external away from the mortgage lender's valuation. And unfortunately, I've been very underwhelmed with what I've been given. And the reason for that is that they tend to create a report that tells you everything about the property, which if you've got any experience in property, you could probably work out for yourself. But more importantly, anything that they can't see or can't get access to, they will write, we can't get access to this particular area, and so therefore it requires further investigation.
Don't you just love that?
That just means nothing. And why am I paying for someone to say it needs further investigation? So things like floorboards not lifted may require further investigation. This can happen sometimes when you get what we call a spongy floor, where floorboards don't feel that solid. Could be subject to some rot of the beams underneath. They can't really definitively say whether or not that's the case unless you lift up the floorboards. But if you don't own the property, you can't lift up the floorboards unless you get prior agreement from the vendors, or unless you, let's say, exchange contracts, maybe lift up the floorboards between exchange and contract and have an agreement whereby you can say, look, if there is a further issue, then we might have to renegotiate on price, which, may not be the best way forward in terms of a negotiation. Or you can just simply say that, believe the property has got a problem here. Would you be prepared for us to further inspect? In which case you could actually get someone to open up the bit that you can't see in order to have a look. So that's kind of the reason why I probably wouldn't do it. If there was significant cracks in the property, then I would be very much of a mind that I would want a structural survey to be done on the property. I don't really need them to report on stuff that I can see. It's more the stuff that is, let's say, integral to the actual structure of it, because that's where the problems can potentially arise.
Yeah, I have bought properties for cash, and done so without having a survey at all. Not a full building structural survey, not any kind of survey. Sometimes people have said to me, "Oh, that sounds very risky," and I think, well, is it though? Because if you've viewed the property, if you've eyeballed the property and you've viewed a few properties in your time, then you can check the roof line, you can check the chimney stack from the outside and make sure it looks vertical and it's straight. You can check that there are no roof tiles sliding all over the place or daylight poking through. You can check that there are no mortar lines that have been clearly patched up and the greys, different colours all over the place. You can check there are no diagonal cracks through a whole load of brickwork. You can check the thing's not leaning like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And if you've been inside the property, even better, because you can, by the way, I have bought property for cash that I've not been inside as well, and they've been absolutely fine. You know, you can do a lot of common sense stuff yourself without being a fully qualified RIC surveyor.
Just to add, actually, we do have a separate video on what to look out for on a viewing, so you might want to go back and watch that one.
We do, yeah. And that's the thing. So I've had these surveys and reports, and you look at them and you think, well, hold on a minute. You didn't lift up the carpets to have a look at what was underneath them. You didn't lift up or move the loft hatch access point to see what the roof was looking like and what was in the loft. You didn't even go into the cellar, if there was a cellar, to see whether it was flooded, because you just said, well, I couldn't get in there because the door was locked. And you just think, well, what have I paid for?
They basically reported exactly what you could have reported yourself. So you have to take a little bit of care, I think, when you're doing this. I do think that mortgage valuations can be useful. So if you are considering buying in cash, or let's say that you are considering the option of either buying with a mortgage or buying with cash, it might be a good idea to perhaps consider the option for mortgage first, because the mortgage company will naturally send the valuer out. And if the valuer comes out and says that they are prepared to lend, then that could be a good indication of whether the property is suitable for mortgaging and, you know, looks structurally okay. One caveat to that I would say is that I did actually have an issue with a property that I was buying, in the sense that I had a mortgage lender come out, look at the property and make a comment about its structural integrity and said that they wouldn't lend. I disagreed with that and actually got a friend of mine who's a structural engineer to come and look at it, and he said, that's kind of historical, that's not movement, it's not structural, it's fine. And then I engaged another lender to come out and value the property, and they said, yep, no problem, we'll lend. So you kind of have to take these things with a pinch of salt. It's like it's like the valuation guy. Does he get out of the bed this side or that side, and what decision is he going to make? So you do have to be a little bit careful with valuations, particularly with mortgage lenders. So it's a good idea, if you know someone who is a structural engineer, to perhaps ask them to look over the property, but only really if you see things that you think that would be relevant to a structural issue. Anything else, I mean, things like slip roof tiles and things like that, even if you do see daylight in the roof, you know, when you lift the loft hatch up, don't turn the light on, leave it darkness and have a look around to see if you can see some light coming through. Because even slip roof tiles are very easy to sort out. It's not a big issue, and it's nothing structural. The tiles on a roof are not a structural thing. People kind of think that they're a bit scary, but actually pretty easy to rectify.
So there are three main types of surveys, right? In summary, there's the mortgage valuation, which is a fairly basic survey, which will be someone coming to have a look at the property. In all honesty, they'll probably spend a relatively short amount of time going around it, and it might feel like a tick box exercise to watch them do it. And they're basically going to conclude whether or not it's suitable security for lending for the mortgage provider that's engaged them. Then you've got a step up from that, which is more like a Homebuyers report, and maybe that's where you might decide that you want to get something a little bit more than something just for the mortgage. And if you want to go full belt and braces, or as much as you can do, then it's a full building structural survey, and that's obviously going to cost money, going to cost time, and it's quite difficult sometimes to get a very fast completion done if you want to get those sorts of surveys done as well. If you want to buy something, and you know, the reason why you're getting a good deal is because you can buy it within 2 weeks with cash. Trying to get something like that is tricky.
So I think it depends on the deal, right? I mean, if it's a particularly good value deal and you're getting it below market value, and the reason why you are is because of its appearance and its quality, or its, you know, lack of quality, let's say, or because it's very run down and you're going to refurbish it anyway, I would tend to think it's probably not worth it. But obviously it does depend on your experience. Neil and I talk about this scenario where we're very experienced in looking at property. If you're less experienced, and even if you are a first-time buyer watching this video, you may well want to, for peace of mind, just want to get a home buyer's report, which is perfectly fine. But I think you'll probably only do that once or twice and then realise that it's probably not worth it. But take some advice from our other video, particularly around what to look out for when you're looking at a property, when you're viewing properties, or take somebody with you that's a bit more experienced, that maybe has their own home already, or that has some good practical knowledge about properties and buildings. Everybody knows somebody that knows a little bit about property, so it might be well worthwhile taking somebody with you. Or even if you know a builder, it's probably going to give you a better result than just a home buyer survey, which is essentially you're paying for somebody to sit down in an office and write a report. So you don't really need a full report. You just need someone just to give you some advice. So we hope that you found that video insightful. Please like, subscribe and share the content, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.